Okay. Um, this is Ted Belman speaking to you. I'm the editor of IsraelPundit.org, and I'm going to be interviewing Mudar Zahran, the Secretary General of the Jordan Opposition Coalition. You may recall that Mudar and I organized a full-day conference on the Jordan option, which was held at the Begin Center in October of last year, and our joint activities, haven't stopped since then. So, Mudar, are you ready to go?
Thanks for having me, Ted.
Okay, my pleasure. The first thing I want to talk to you about is that there's been a lot of protests in Jordan. Can you comment on what's happening there?
Jordan has been engulfed into protests against the king and against the regime, which have been ongoing for over 3 weeks now. In fact, we're hitting the 4th week. The protests were sweeping and still remain sweeping the country. To name a few particular areas of engagement were Salt City, which is 9 miles away from Amman; Diban, which is the biblical Diban, which is barely 8 miles away from Amman's borders; Amman in the refugee camps, so-called refugee camps; in Zarqa, Jordan's 2nd largest city; in Kerak, Jordan's the southern city with the famous castle, Crusader Castle. The protests were very clear. People are targeting the king himself and his family. They're targeting his wife. We have told and warned right at the conference, me and my deputy, Abd Allah, we said that Jordan, this was back in October, we said Jordan will explode within the next 6 months. And there's very little time to save Jordan. And now you can see the results even prior to the time we set up. The protests are not new. We've seen these before, only this time they are targeting the regime itself. Renowned global media like the Times newspaper, the most renowned, one of the oldest papers in Europe, which is considered conservative, is reporting on it and stating clearly that the public is protesting against the king himself and not anyone else.
Well, let me ask you a question here, if I may. Who's behind the protests? What is causing the protests to take place?
People have had enough. People have had enough poverty, humiliation, apartheid. The apartheid includes the Jordanians of Palestinian heritage, the Jordanian of so-called Bedouin heritage, the Jordanians of the northern area. These are the 3 most discriminated against categories in the country, which basically together they make up to 95% of the population. Poverty, the king's injustice, oppression. He is a clean-cut dictator. That's what he is. We were very happy and pleased to announce that we proudly have instigated these protests and remain one of the main influences and guiders, the Jordanian Opposition Coalition.
So they're actively involved, I understand.
Yes, and this is evidence that those peaceful protests were instigated by us is by itself evidence and an answer to anyone who has doubted our ability to mobilize the street. And I would like to go on record as saying that we're not going to stop until the Hashemites all depart our country and until Jordan is free and a secular, progressive country.
Okay.
So we're not going to stop. We do influence the course and the geography of those protests.
What is the king doing in response? How is he handling the protests?
He can't do anything. The Jordanian Intelligence Department is a patriotic organization that stands by the side of the people. So does the Jordanian army. The king only controls his bodyguards, which is, a few thousands or even few thousands. And that's about it. He has no control over anything.
Now, some people are saying that the numbers are very small. Are they, and do you expect them to increase?
Well, seeing is believing. You can go and verify and check the videos of the protests. I don't care what other people say. We are on the front line. We are the ones, the Jordanian people, who are risking their lives and going against a dictator who's armed to the teeth. So what anyone else is saying from the comfort of their living room, either in D.C., London, or Jerusalem, is basically irrelevant.
Do you expect the numbers to increase over the next few months?
Numbers are increasing every day. And the numbers now fluctuate between thousands to tens of thousands, depending on the weather, the day, and this is only the beginning. We have had enough. We Jordanians have had enough.
Does the king know his days are numbered?
Excuse me?
Does the king know his days are numbered?
I can't share some of the information we have, but we know that he knows he's on his very last leg. This is the real deal. This is not like the previous Arab Spring where he was weakened, but still managed to maintain himself with the help of Obama. This is the real deal. The U.S. and anyone else, I don't think anyone sees an interest in bailing out a dictator who has turned his kingdom into a foreign aid black hole.
Okay.
I can't see a way to save the king. Is
there any threat to your movement by the Muslim Brotherhood or by ISIS or the world order?
Well, the threat comes basically not from ISIS or the Muslim Brotherhood, because the Muslim Brotherhood is fully aligned with the king. While we are protesting, while the Jordanians are protesting against the king and his family, the Muslim Brotherhood held a mass celebration of the king's birthday. That tells you where the Muslim Brotherhood stands. And this should be the answer to anyone who was claiming that the king was against the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood equals the king. He falls, they fall and follow.
What is the king doing now? How much time does he spend in Jordan? Where does he have homes? Give me a little bit of the background of how he lives.
The king has already organized his lifestyle in exile. He has everything laid out, everything set up. This has been the case since 2015. And since then, he's working on bar time. He spends like a fraction of his time in the country, sometimes less than total, like less than 10% of the year. And this is documented with his visits. He spends a very little time. He has all his wealth, money set up abroad. We are in a good shape. The change in Jordan will mark a very historical landmark in the region. First of all, Jordan has always been, since the Hashemites took over, the beehive and the family's home for the Muslim Brotherhood. And Jordan has also been the main instigator of unrest regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Both the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the Muslim Brotherhood have been the advanced tools that the globalists have been using for a very long time. That's why they have been aiding the king, because as long as there is a king in Jordan who is foreign to the country, there will always be a Muslim Brotherhood and a Palestinian-Arab conflict.
So let me ask you, it appears that Jordan is drawing closer to Turkey and Qatar and Iran and has major differences with Saudi Arabia. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, Jordan's king, not Jordan and the 82-member royal family have been in bed with Iran, Qatar, Erdogan for the last 7 years. In addition to the Muslim Brotherhood, blessing and gluing all of that. It only came into the public eye. Basically, the king now is saying what he has been doing secretly for 7 years. And again, all of those who questioned what we've been reporting about the king, Iran, Erdogan, Muslim Brotherhood being close friends, all of those who have questioned us in the past should be very ashamed of themselves.
How is Saudi Arabia relating to all this activity? What do they want to see happen?
Saudi Arabia has always been a true ally of the Jordanian people, a true ally of the Palestinian people, and with this new and very pragmatic, very ambitious young man serving as crown prince, we're looking at a whole new different Saudi policy and a whole new different Middle East as an outcome. The Saudis would
let me question you, because I always thought that Saudi Arabia was not a friend of the Palestinians, and they've excluded them. They won't let them come. There's all kinds of restrictions. And you
That's not true.
Friendly. Okay, clarified.
That's not true. Saudi Arabia has always welcomed Palestinian migrant workers. A Palestinian in Saudi Arabia automatically gets a green card. He or she doesn't get a citizenship. They cannot become citizens of Saudi. But this has been the case for the last 70 years. Any Palestinian in Saudi Arabia would never get deported, would always be able to stay upon arrival. I can't say any Arab country has offered the Palestinians that. At the same time, Saudi Arabia and this crown prince has offered the Jordanian people more than $7 billion in the last 3 years alone to support the Jordanian people versus the expense of the refugees and other things.
How does Saudi Arabia feel about the potential abdication of the king?
I can't speak for our Saudi brothers and friends, but all I can say is, what does Saudi want? Saudi wants the Muslim Brotherhood eradicated. Saudi Arabia wants peace, on a lasting and just peace with the Israelis, as long as it's comprehensive through a more logical and acceptable peace package.
What are chances of this peace coming out of the closet, of their relationship being public?
Let me finish, please. Saudi Arabia does not want Jordan to fall into the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood or Iran. And in this case, the King of Jordan has empowered both the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran in Jordan. This is very dangerous, and this could hinder Saudi's stability and efforts for peace. And that's what could change. At the moment, peace could happen, but we have a major obstacle on the way, and that major obstacle is the King of Jordan and his royal family. How can we target Iran and focus our efforts against the Iranian enemy and Iranian threat if Jordan has Iranians all over, facilitated and welcomed by the Hashemite regime? If the Iranian intelligence, they have a whole unit operating in Jordan under the king's blessings, and nothing could be done about it for now, because the king is simply not respecting any of his so-called traditional allies, like the United States or the United Kingdom.
Right.
The king has turned himself into an obstacle. We take this chance to confirm our warning. Unless the kinglet, as we call him, or the so-called king, is ousted sometime this year, no later than summer.
So it's in their interest that he be removed from office, basically.
It's a mutual interest for the Jordanian people. It's an interest for the moderate forces in the region. It's an interest for anyone else who wants to see peace and stability thrive and expand.
Okay, what kind of economic relationship do you expect when you, let's assume that you take over? What kind of relationship will there be between Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, in your mind?
Well, we obviously are in the middle, and we would like to facilitate all forms of economic normalization with Israel. Between our Arab brothers and Israel, we've spent 70 years antagonizing the Israelis and the Jews in general. We gained nothing out of that, and I think most Arabs, and publicly even the Arabs even in the West Bank, they've come to a conclusion that this whole so-called conflict is not worth it. We want to facilitate the soil, land transportation, and we want to also offer tax exemptions and tax exempt environment, which welcomes Israeli businesses, where they can export their products to the Middle East as Israeli products produced in Jordan. And the sky is the limit The problem has always been economic. The Israelis have always